Welcome to your Family Health Revolution conversation series with Carla, Atherton, and friends, where our HFF family comes together not to tell you what you should do, but what you can do. Take charge of your health. You can do this. In fact, you're the only person who can. This is Carla Atherton, Director of the Healthy Family Formula and host and producer of the Children's Health Summit. And I am here with Michele Zipper for a new series that we're doing. It's called Your Family Health Revolution, and it's conversations with friends. And so my friend today is Michele Zipper. And I'm just going to give a little background about Michele before I invite her into this conversation we're going to have about reconnection, the healing power of the mind and body. All right, so Michele Zipper is a master's nutrition and wellness coach and co-owner of the Well Center, an integrative healthcare center in Westchester, New York. She works both in person and virtually with clients, helping them to make nutrition and holistic lifestyle changes, create routines, and break through roadblocks and adopt healthier habits. Michele is a mom of 3 kids, a loving wife, and a wellness enthusiast. She's worked personally with leading health and wellness experts in her own journey of self-discovery, healing, and creating balance in her own life, and is passionate about sharing her knowledge and insights with you. Her passion lies with the family unit and together creating harmony through food, bonding, and wellness. Every family needs a healthy role model, so she welcomes you to let her guide you in discovering your own personal journey. So, welcome, Michele.
Thank you, Carla, for having me. I'm
Yes,
so
I'm
happy.
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy you're here too because not just because, well, obviously because you're you, and it's so I love talking to you, and I think that we have a very common passion about the mind-body connection. And I know that in your profession and like because you do the work that you do and you've also lived the experience, I think actually that's often what happens with us in life, right? We live this experience or we want to or we need to, and then we start doing that to help to support others and that's on that same kind of journey. So you did mention before we started recording that you had this pivotal moment that had you realize the mind body connection. And so let's start there with that story, and then we'll be able to introduce this whole conversation about the mind body and the healing power of the mind body connection.
Absolutely. I think it started about 10 years ago
Mhm.
when my husband had Lyme. He was diagnosed with Lyme. And so I kind of like jumped into, mama bear action and really learned how that's when I started really understanding food as medicine and jumping in and I think I cooked every meal for him and
Mm.
we tried every protocol under the sun and I had 3 kids under 5 at the time. So I had, little ones. So I was trying to hold together, a husband who really was really sick for about 2 years, 3 little kids, you know, and everything along that went with it. And about a year into this journey, my back went out. And
Oh.
I had had back surgery when I was like 20. So this was, not new to me, but I went to all my doctors. I went to the usual. I was like, something is going on. I have pinched nerve. I have something, herniated disc, nothing. All the tests came out negative. And so someone had said to me, they're like, you know what? I have one person you can try. I don't know if it'll help, but you can try. And this person is still in my life. He's a holistic chiropractor who is just incredible. And I went on his table. I had no idea what I was in for. And he hardly touched me. He did his magic, and I think I cried like a baby. And I like let out these guttural cries that I obviously was holding all this
Mhm.
together over the past year. And I walked out halfway better. I couldn't walk into his office. I was hunched over, like limping into his office. I walked out and I was like, what did you
Mm.
do to me? He's like, it was all your mind. It was all emotions that were just stored in your back, that you were just
Mhm.
holding it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
after about 2 more times, after 3 total, I was 100% better. And, I now religiously go to him. In fact, he actually works at my center now. I've gotten him one day a
Ah.
week. because I just want him close to me. But that really kind of sparked the understanding of, the physical and the emotional and the mind and how it really is connected. And ever since then, it's been a game changer that I don't take any pains or anything in
Mm-mm.
the body for its face value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what was so interesting? So we didn't actually, you didn't tell me the story. I'm like, no, tell me on air. Tell me on air. Because you said you
I,
had this pivotal moment where you realized,
yeah.
aha, this is what this is. It's like before believing that, like you got this problem with your back, you might need another surgery, my back went out, la la la, all these physical reasons for it. As soon as you started telling me that story, I'm thinking in my mind, oh, that's emotional. Like when you said that this happened with your husband, you had all these pressures on you, and I'm like, and your back went out before you even said, went a step further in that story, I was like, that's emotion. She was carrying all of that. And there's so much to be said about that. There's like, and I don't want to go like be a research, like I think research is beneficial for sure. And it's basically just another way to say that we're looking into something and gathering more information so that we can form some kind of ideas or conclusions or what like get more information, I guess, about something. But so I don't ascribe to like putting all of my belief or whatever into like a research topic or a researched book or a research article, but there's so much now stacking up of that and anecdotal, your stories, right? Anecdotal evidence and also just lived experience of my own and what witnessing and the actual truth about the human body and the mind and the soul and how inextricable all of those things are. It's like a no-brainer now that when people say my back hurts, I'm like, yeah, you can be looking into your diet. You can be looking into, lifestyle factors like sleep and how the position that you're sleeping in, whether you're breathing or not. Of course, all those things matter, but the emotional piece, massive. And when you said that the chiropractor did his magic, worked his magic or whatever, and when you said you
Yeah.
cried, that's actually, you finished a process of healing that you were locked in, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
It's so heart opening. It's like it just opens up another piece of you that has been locked or closed.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not just like thinking about your emotions and thinking about that event and like a relief that your husband's better and you're not going through that what like you were going through before. But it's literally like a storage being, it's like the top of the bottle being let out and the storage of all that stuff. So again, it's like allowing the body to finish that process. That's sort of like you're stuck in. Oh, it's
Yeah.
like that's like it's like the clearest example of like, that kind of process actually taking place and how
Yeah.
healing that
And
can be. Hmm.
and it's so interesting, like even on a daily basis, you don't have to go to a healer, you don't have to go to that for, just
Mm,
even hearing a song and all of a sudden you just start crying or laughing, and all of a sudden you feel better and you're like, I didn't realize I was holding that. I didn't, you don't even know what you're holding. It's just you're holding
yeah.
something, right? And it's so those little micro moments in the day as well can be super healing if you're attached to, if you connect with those.
Yeah, totally. And like because I think what we do is we tend to like we purposefully hold it because we don't want to feel it. And it's uncomfortable. Yet I guess you learn to become comfortable in the discomfort. Like there's ways when you become comfortable in the discomfort that's not good. Like when you're like, oh, I'm just going to be sick forever, and I don't want to make change because I'm scared, and this emotional thing. Like I'm just going to be comfortable being like miserable, right? Because that's at least I know what to expect.
At least we know it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but there's another way to be comfortable in the uncomfortable in that you're like, okay, what's this gonna be? And I'm gonna cry or I'm gonna, like release something or I'm gonna be angry or I'm gonna like something's coming up. But I'm comfortable with that process because I know that it's supposed to happen.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because I think I didn't, I've always heard that you have to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And what does that actually really
Yeah.
mean, right?
Yeah.
Like till you go through it. And I think that like we've been through so much in our family in the past 10 years that like,
Mm,
I finally understand what that, and when the pandemic hit, this was actually so interesting. Everyone into lockdown, and we were like, all holed up as a family, and all of a sudden our energies are just like bouncing off each other, right? And we realized like how much how much we were like kind of putting under the rug in our family,
um,
like how much stress with each other. And my one son had a problem with it, and we've just kind of like in our busyness of our everyday life, we had just kind of pushed it under the rug. And
mhm.
then pandemic, and you're forced to face it. And I think that's when it really hit for me. Like you have to face this in the eye. And even though like I could have been miserable, I was like, all right, like everybody's fighting, everyone was at each other for like, and this probably lasted more than lockdown. This was like a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I had to sit with like, okay, this is coming up for a reason. Like this is here to show us what, and I'm gonna cry because it's so
Mm.
emotional, but what we need to work on. And that's when it really solidified of like, okay, like let's work on this. Let's get it as a family. And we did. And you know what? The past 6 months, probably more than that, 9 months have been like incredible. And that's not to say that there's no problems at all.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
just we've learned how to now kind of work with each other a lot more to handle that roller coaster.
Yes. Yeah, I love
So
that. I mean, okay, so I'm just sort of I want to come back to that because um I think that, it's like when you have this intense, like a physical issue or, like something like you were talking about the lockdown. I think a lot of people were experiencing that because it was literally like forced. You were forced to actually take knowledge, to take notice. It's like, what an illness happens or this lockdown or, you really can't escape, actually looking at it when most of the time we spend a lot of time distracting ourselves or trying to escape when really like if you just look at it, you have so much more beauty and growth in your not just your body, but your mind, your soul, your family. Like I mean,
mhm.
it's not like something you're going to go and want to choose. Like you're not like, "Hey, I want to have, where we're not allowed to do this and allowed to do this and we don't have, we have all this fear in our community and all this stuff." Like you're not choosing that, but it's there, right? It's happening, it's part of that, becoming. I mean, it's like remembering. I keep talking about this concept of wholeness. It's like remembering different, all these different things, or looking at them, reflecting on them, to return to this like wholeness. So it's like your family's wholeness, and you're more whole today than you were before. And it
Yes.
wasn't comfortable. I mean,
No, it was really
yeah.
uncomfortable, and we had to sit in that, and there was a lot of writing, and there was a lot of,
Mm,
crying, and there was a lot of everything, but
yeah.
it really it helped process it so that we didn't hold on to it as a family, or specifically, in that case. But like, when you're going through an illness, or an emotional trauma,
Yeah.
to process it, and journaling. I mean, that's one tool I use a lot with my clients, and
Yeah.
it's just to have you have to have an outlet to get these things out.
Yeah. And I think that, like, when you say like a physical or an emotional or like, issue, I think they're actually always happen simultaneously. Like there, there's so like mind body. So when we talk about mind body, we talk about the mind and the emotional body, affecting the physical body and then vice versa, but they're actually inextricable to me. Like, and and I still will like tease them out separately, but at the same time, like, but no, 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 no. They're actually a whole. So it's like when we have your back, for instance, there's always like, obviously there was probably something happened physically. Like sometimes like people go wrench it and like, oh my goodness. But there might have been a weakness there in the first place. But there's always an emotional component to all of it. Like always, like I never see someone have something happen to them that we would consider a physical ailment or whatever, or dis-ease physically,
Mhm.
that doesn't have some kind of like, oh, I just had my new baby, oh, I just got fired from my job, or we just moved, oh, I'm having problems with my spouse. There's never a time where that there's not an element of that as well.
Exactly. And there is so many, I mean, it's also, about stress, right? Anytime you're going through something with stress related, your cortisol, your hormones are all
Yeah.
messed up, and that affects your gut, and that affects and that causes, so that's a real thing.
Yeah.
But it also is the fact that we just hold it, we hold it in our body, um and I guess it manifests and it finds the weaknesses in our body
Mm-hmm.
whenever
Mm-hmm.
we're stressed.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to, so another topic I want to jump to with you, and I want to know what your thoughts are on this, about mind and matter. So, like, there again, there's a lot of discussion about mind over matter, or how
Mhm.
we can change our actual physical existence by how we think and what we focus on. Do you have any thoughts about that, Michelle? Do you want to share?
You know what? I do. I think, it comes from the idea that like someone, when you have like a bad knee, right? You're attached to that problem. So
Yeah.
I think we attach to pain, and we attach to the story of that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And we attach to the fact that we can't run, or we can't do this because of our knee, or we can't, play with our kids, and all that. So I think one part of that story is that to letting it go, right? And how do we
Yeah.
let that story go, and kind of changing the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you do, you realize you start to let it go. And I think that what happened with my back was partly in that as well. Like, it was the healer, and it was the emotion, it was the crying. But it was also that, like, once I kind of knew it wasn't real, the pain, like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't physical, it was more emotional, I stopped attaching to that story that my back hurt.
Mm.
And that was also part of, like, my intention is like, okay, I'm good. And I think intentions, and what we attach to these pains, and what it says to us is really important, and we have to learn how to let that go.
Yeah, and want to, because sometimes I'm going to say it, and people are like, why would I want to hang on to this? Well, sometimes we do, because again, it's
It's
like, it's
comfortable.
scary, it's comfortable. Yeah, it's comfortable. You're comfortable in that discomfort, in the one that's like perpetuating your, like dis-ease, your state of disharmony. And what does that look like if I was different? What would it look like if I'm not XYZ? How would I define myself if I didn't, or how do I get, like, in sometimes it's like, how do I get recognition for all that effort I made to get this diagnosis in the first place? Like, I fought hard because nobody believed me. Like, your husband dealt with Lyme. I mean, people
Mhm.
would tell you like there's no such thing, and whether it is or isn't, like, the point is that there is this like fight to recognize my discomfort. Like, I wanted someone to witness that and help me through that, and nobody did. So, like,
Right.
there's a
And
reason
it's
right there.
validation. And it's
Validation.
validation, right? It's validating. Look, there's really something wrong with me. Here, I
Mhm.
have the diagnosis. And I think a diagnosis is actually really like, it's a little bit dangerous in
It
in
totally
some
is.
cases. Obviously, sometimes you need it. You need a diagnosis. But I don't, I do believe that it's really the underlying, like, healing opportunities.
Yeah.
And how can we heal your body? You don't necessarily need that diagnosis.
Well, if anybody's listened to anything I've said, I said over and over again, I literally don't even ascribe to diagnoses anymore, because, and again, I'm like you. I'd say, okay, people want to know, like, they want to validate, they want to know, like, maybe some solutions, because if I have this group of symptoms, then that means this, and then that might be like, lead me to the answers, right? And yeah, I get that. And I taught functional medicine and functional, principles for a long time. And I'm not throwing that baby out with the bathwater, but definitely diagnoses. Like, I say, okay, well, what is it that's going on for you? I don't even really necessarily talk about symptoms. Like, symptoms are, just something that's going on, because there's a negative connotation to symptoms too. And does it mean that it's a bad thing, or does it mean it's the body talking to you that there's need for some kind of completion of a healing process, or like an upgrade going on? Sometimes it's literally you're upgrading. And so we associate so much with a diagnosis. We identify with it. We say, and I remember, okay, Michelle, get this. And actually stepped in here. My daughter at one
Okay.
point wanted to own this type 1 diabetes diagnosis. She wanted to just to be in her power. And so a friend of hers at this camp for kids who had diabetes, she had a tattoo that said type 1 diabetic on her arm.
Mm.
And I'm like, ooh, I see what you're doing. I understand that, but you can't identify with a label someone gave you, even though you're trying to, empower yourself with not being limited by that diagnosis. But I want to take that further instead of limiting, not being limited by the diagnosis. How about we don't even we don't even identify the diagnosis in the first place?
It's absolutely so true. And I think also it makes us feel comfortable when we have a diagnosis, but I
Mm.
also think that it makes other people feel comfortable because
Aha.
it's something that like, you're off for a reason, or your child is off for a reason. But if you give them like, oh, but I have this diagnosis,
Right.
it makes them feel comfortable, So I think
Yeah.
it's also for you, but also for them.
Yeah.
I think one of the scariest diagnoses for me is like an ADHD diagnosis with
Mm.
kids, because
Hmm.
I think so many people, and not scary in like you don't want to hear it,
Right.
but
Gotcha.
people take that diagnosis and they're like, okay, okay, it's ADHD. I'm gonna throw medicine, and that explains why he's not behaving or she's not behaving, or it explains all of the trouble that we're having. And then we throw medicine at it, and I have two of those diagnoses, and I'm sure that I have it undiagnosed at some point. um, but instead of throwing medicine at it, I said, okay, that means that there's something wrong. Like, let's just figure out the underlying. And it's taken me years and lots of trial and error and work to really uncover um, what's going on underneath that. But I think for me, that's like a diagnosis. When I hear that, I'm like, I think 50% of the people I know, their kids, someone has it, and I
But
think
what
it's,
is
I
it?
don't know.
But what is it? I'm
What
gonna
is
like,
it, right?
right? Like, what do you mean has it? Like, it's not you. It's like, okay. So, for instance, I could say, I could look at myself, especially in my history, and I've had like cognitive stuff going on, and I
Mhm.
attribute it to a whole bunch of other stuff. Like gluten wasn't my friend, and I mean, like it just wasn't. It was messing with me, and I had a whole bunch of symptoms that I could easily have said, ooh, this is like, and I've studied functional neurology like till the cows came home. Like I'm not just talking about read a couple of articles. Like I've studied with a couple of the big brain docs, and and some of that stuff again, not really speaking to me. It's not quite the truth. And then a lot of that stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that and as informative, right? But I like to this day, I could say, now that I like forgotten my keys, or I couldn't get word retrieval or something like that, would be deemed as like brain degeneration. You got to be careful. You got to feed your brain, nourish your brain. Sure, we need to do all of those very healthful things because they're congruent with what we want. If we believe that that's going to help our brain, or we believe that what we're doing, if we eat McDonald's, it's not going to, well, that's going to happen, right? I'm not going to say, believe McDonald's good is good for you and then you're going to be fine. Well, actually, some people might even say that. They might even say mind over matter. If you believe that fully, then it's like the placebo effect, right? Yet I don't believe that, and I don't think I ever will. Because it's incongruent with me. If I'm looking at that, I'm like, bad industry. They don't take care. Like they don't take care of their animals. They put a bunch of junk in there. They don't care about my food or my body. The energy in that food is dead, right? So I know that. Like so that's incongruent. If I ate that and said, oh, I'm going to feed my brain, that's not going to work out. But
No.
what I'm trying to say is that I could say, so going back to the diagnosis thing, I could self diagnose or go in there and get a diagnosis. I sought a diagnosis for so long, not because I wanted to be labeled, but because I wanted to know what to do. Like, okay, do I have stiff man syndrome? Because all my joints are so sore. Like, literally, I couldn't move like without feeling pain. I couldn't walk up and down the stairs without my knees like screaming. And I was 35. I gained 35 pounds. I was not doing well. I was also hyper stressed. We were building a house. I was homeschooling three kids at the same time as working three-quarter time as a faculty member at a university. Okay? Like, and I was out here, we built this house with our bare hands, 1,500 square feet on one floor, two floors. Okay? So crazy, out at an acreage. Okay? So, and I got, like, it was insane. And I'm like, right? Like, so all those things are happening at the same time. And I'm seeking, after that diagnosis, I'm seeking because I'm going down that functional medicine route, that root cause resolution, which is a beautiful exploration, but at the same time leading me down the wrong path to labeling myself rather than saying, okay, look, Carla, you got these symptoms. What are you going to do about those symptoms? What's going on in your life that you can change that's going to help you, which I ultimately did. but okay, this is a really long story, and I want you to talk now. I'm sorry, I just keep talking, but
No, all
um,
good.
but my point was that, now to this day, actually, it's really shifted even more so in the last year because I've really like, how you said that you had to see it and feel it and experience it to really like to make those shifts happen in your like literally in your consciousness, in your worldview, because you kind of
Yeah.
you understood it. Maybe you'd heard about it before, but like once you lived it, you're like, okay, I get this now. So what now I've actually I've observed my thoughts and my thoughts about what, like, let's say I forget I had a dissected carotid artery too, and so that was crazy, big clot, like
Uh,
occluded all the
the same
oxygen to the
thing.
side of my brain, like that was like 4 5 years ago. And I could say, if I had like I forgot something, or my brain got tired for some reason, I could say, "Oh, I'm scared because I could have XYZ, right? This diagnosis, I could have these residual effects from that. I could have like brain damage, like all these things, right?" And then and then I'm thinking, "No, I just forgot my keys. Forgot my kid." I, I'm not going to pathologize everything that happens in my life, because then then you go down that road and you medicate for no, like where you don't need to, or you miss the opportunity to learn something. You miss the chance to actually say, I'm actually going to eat, like, what am I going to eat now to make me feel a little better? You miss
Yeah.
all of that because you're
You miss
too
the
busy chasing the
curiosity.
cure, and you're too busy labeling yourself or limiting yourself or getting scared about what it could be, what that could mean, instead of like being open to the possibility, right? Like, yeah.
Y- Yeah, and I think, you miss the opportunity to be curious about what's going on instead of just like stopping it in its track and saying, this is it. This is,
Yeah.
you can say, "Okay, what is going on? How can I help myself?" As you said, like, what can I eat to make myself feel better? Why do I feel this way after I ate a certain thing, right? Like, I woke up this morning feeling so bloated, right? Like, and I
Yeah.
realized, and I've been really trying to like stay very clean recently. It's just for my own sake, but yesterday I had a lot of dairy. It was Father's Day and I had a lot of
Yep.
dairy, and I ate a little bit off the beaten path, and I was like, oh yeah, it's either dairy or red sauce, one of those two things that I never really eat. But it's that curiosity instead of saying, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, I have this,
Yeah.
this, and this. I was just like, okay, what can I do? Let's try it next time. Let's see if it happens next time.
Yep.
And that
It's like,
curiosity.
and you're not saying it's because I have IBS, or it's my Lyme
Right.
disease kicking up again, or it's, and okay, so there's this like balance, right? Okay, so curiosity, the thought, but also then ultimate knowing that, and this is one thing I've been really struggling with, like just like trying this on. Okay, so I've been attending this group, and it's an instant healing, right? Like you talk about instant healing. And so it is a fact that every moment of every day, everything's new. Like we're not at all the same as we were the second before. Our cells change, our, like things die and come back, and they regenerate, the new cells are formed. We're different every second, every moment. And so why not, in this kind of, well, I'm taking people to quantum reality. Why not that
Yeah.
it's like, we don't have to recreate yesterday, but we recreate it because that's what we know. And we're only
Right.
comfortable with healing at a rate that we believe possible. So I'm just putting it out there that what we think or believe, and it's not even just belief, it's what we understand to be truth. That actually affects our future. And so you can get to that point where you're like, rah, rah, I'm going to do this, which is, you and I have been in that position. Like, okay, I've got this diagnosis, but I can overcome that. But now it's like you can get to that point where it's less, you don't even have to believe, you don't even believe in the diagnosis in the first place. Like
Well, it's interesting
literally,
you say
yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Because I actually was diagnosed with Lyme about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I had that too.
And yeah, I know.
It's
Right,
like,
exactly.
no,
I think a
not that
lot of
I'm under, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to say that your experience is not important, but I understand. I know, yeah, what those symptoms
yeah,
are and
no,
all that.
totally. And exactly. And I was literally brain fog. That's all I was. And that's why it
Ah,
sparked me to go to the doctor. But you're right, I don't live like I don't have anything. Like I take some vitamins and I take some supplements and stuff and herbs just to really like supplement my body and make sure it's running
yeah,
well. But like
yes, yes.
I just live like, I don't live like there's anything. And there is, they may or may not be at this point, who knows? But,
Hmm.
if I'm feeling a little off that day, I rest. I listen to my body versus like being like, oh, it's Lyme. I'm like, oh, I'm
Right.
just feeling off today. I'm gonna get,
Yeah.
for me, it shows up in cold. I start shivering, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I can tell it's usually under like when I'm stressed or cold and I'm like, oh, I might be having a Lyme reaction or whatever. But then I just jump, I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna jump in the bath, I'm gonna
Yeah.
warm myself up, and then I come out feeling great.
Yep.
But, it's attached. You said actually something before that really resonated with me, and it's about like, you have thoughts in your head,
Yeah.
and it's really about what those thoughts, what you turn into those thoughts, and
Mm.
what you make of those thoughts, that how it guides your actions. And part of really what actually ultimately changed my family was really me going through like a whole DBT program, which is dialectical thinking.
Right. Right.
um, and for me, it was like I had to really learn like things can come in. You're what I'll give you just a random example. A child slams the door in your face. You
Hmm.
can, create that story. He's rude. He's obnoxious. He's disrespecting me. He's, whatever. He's going to end up like being, running away from me in 10 years. Like you can turn that story into something,
Yeah.
and then, or you can be like, okay, he just slammed the door. Okay, he's probably a little angry. Let's give him some time. And
Right.
those two ways of attaching to that thought
Uh-huh.
can create a fully different outcome, and I think it can go one way or a 180, and so I think that's just an interesting way of like, you don't want to attach to those thoughts, whether it's a physical thought or, it's
Diagnosis.
like, it's just thought. Diagnosis, exactly. It's a thought, it's a label, and it's really what you make of it that affects your actions and the course of it.
Yes, completely. Completely. Like
Yeah,
you can live a completely different life depending on how you decided to take that, how you decided to respond rather than react to it. You know,
totally. I mean,
I want to know, okay, so you have a practice, you are privy to a lot of different tools, and I want to actually talk about some tools for people listening that can work with the knowing that our mind and
yeah.
body are connected, not just mind, body, but spirit, like all the whole self. And so, how do we move away from just like doing one thing? Like I mean, I think people are twigged onto like nutrition now and like things like that. Like, but now it's become like pill for no that way sometimes too. Like I'm going to take this supplement for this and na 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 na. But
Yeah.
also we want to be recognized in the biochemistry and all that stuff. But I want to talk about like some practices, just some of your maybe your favorites. You mentioned DBT. That's interesting. A couple different things that you would consider to be practices, like you said, everyday life, or you know, recognizing that mind body connection so that you feel better in your physical self and as well as mental self.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously the obvious one would be meditation, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't have to be anything more than 5 minutes and just sitting in stillness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to know how to meditate, but I think just quieting your body and your mind and not go, go, go,
Mm-hmm.
just creates that pause to become more intentioned and awareness. And I think it's interesting. The first thing that I work with patients is awareness, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I think there's three things to making change. There's awareness, willingness, and tools. That's
Yeah.
like, right? So you have to be willing, obviously, to make the changes. But I think awareness is like, do you know what you're putting in your body? Just talking about the nutrition, or right, like awareness. I feel bloated. Okay, maybe why? Or I have a headache after so and so, comes to my house. What does that
Right.
mean? But it's just being aware of like, oh, I like to eat at night. I like, and so that's the first step, I feel like, in making any changes, is to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
become more mindful. And I think, with parenting, it was a game changer for me. With health, it was a game changer. And so that would be like, it sounds so easy, it's simple, but it's not easy. Like, if,
Right.
and right, like, it's simple, sure, slow down, like become aware of what you're, but it's not easy. It takes
It comes with
practice, and
practice.
it comes
Yes.
with practice. And so that's why I love just sitting for 5 minutes once a day, twice a day, in the car when you're in pickup line or something, not grabbing your phone, just saying, okay, set a timer for 5 minutes so I won't sleep through the pickup line,
Right.
because I've done that, right? You're like, oh wait, the cars are moving and I better
Yeah.
get honked at. But instead of 5 minutes of scrolling on Instagram or checking your email or whatever, it's like just sit and breathe,
Mm.
and make sure you get that breath into your belly. So that way, when you do need to, kind of go for it in a state when you need it a little bit, you have that tool. You have to practice it.
Yeah, and getting centered, grounded, awareness, all that stuff that meditation will do. And also just like it's like mindfulness. Like you don't even have to sit with your eyes closed and meditate. Like, I remember, I mean, talking about, I actually wrote this about this in my book about, like asking my grandma, if she was in pain, what was that pain? Like the physical awareness too. Like, what is that I need to do? Do I need to move around? Do I need to stretch? Do I need to, like, is it like inflammation of my joints? Is it something, like, can I adjust something that I'm eating? Or like, am I, all those different questions, and they all have different answers. And so when we're right, so we're more, and again, like, if we're more aware of what our body's telling us, then we're less likely to shut it up, dumb it down, and pretend that there's no connection between all the parts that make us whole. So there's so much more intelligence about ourselves that happens, when we do that. And that I love that you mentioned that, because I didn't even have this on my list. I have a little list of things that I might want to mention, right? And I didn't even.
Yeah,
That's like the first step, and it's the first
right.
step.
It is.
Yeah, that
Right,
awareness.
exactly.
And you
The
can
awareness and just
cultivate
being
that.
one.
Exactly. And you cultivate that through things like meditation, through breath work, right? Like
Yep.
that is another thing. And also there's a release there that happens unconsciously. Like we know that there's something going on there that's like just being released, and like such healing happens just by doing, not like belly breathing, but also moving into more like intentional, like breath work that's a little bit more intense,
Right. Right.
right? I've been doing that
Yeah.
for a while now. That's been really interesting.
I used to do it, and I was actually just thinking last night, coincidentally, I was like, I need to go back to my breath work. I do.
Yeah.
Like, when I can't sleep with my mouth, the nose breathing, and
Mm.
I slept for a little bit with my mouth shut, just trying to like release everything. And I used to do it, and I was like, I can't do that now. I got to get back to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, mouth breathing's not good. If you mouth breathe during sleep, okay, people listening, tape your mouth shut, and then get used to breathing through your nose, because you're stress breathing through the night, and you're not resting.
exactly.
You're getting chased by a bear
Exactly.
all night long. It's not good.
It's true. It's true. You can't actually fully get into that parasympathetic.
No, you can't. Yeah, there's a whole book about that called Breath, by James Nestor. He actually mouth
Mhm.
breathed intentionally to see how it changes as his physiology and his physicality, like his everything. And he was just like, it's an awesome book, and it has some breathing techniques, but that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then there's also things like EFT, like emotional freedom technique, like tapping. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
sweet. I've used that quite a lot myself, and then with clients as well.
Yeah.
And then
I have to.
yoga. Come on. Yoga
I
is like
know.
it's qigong. Like yoga's my heart. Like, when you talk
Yeah.
about, like you were telling that story about you releasing all that with the chiropractor. I
Mhm.
witnessed that and had those similar kinds of experiences by practicing yoga. It's like, and when my yoga teacher, I did a teacher training, so I'm actually trained as a yoga teacher, and my trainer, like my yoga teacher, she said that like, and I think a lot of people say this, but the issues are in the tissues, right? Like, it's like, and when the movement, there's no words necessary, there's no, lab work or finding this out, whatever. You just actually
Yeah.
just move your body
Move
in
through it. You move
you.
things so they don't become stagnant. And
Yeah.
when things become stagnant, that's when a lot of things can fester.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
I
you
also love,
go
oh,
ahead, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I also love, speaking of movement, I love dancing. For
Oh,
me, like
yeah.
I do love yoga, but I need to release. We had this silent dance party through our center like a few months ago, and we're actually having another one in a few weeks. And it was like, they brought us through, it was this 5 rhythms that brought us through all the different like types of rhythms. And I mean, at one point, I didn't even know my body existed. I was like, and afterward, you're ecstatic because you just don't realize how much moved out of your body, you know?
Totally. I've been part of privy to those. I dance all the time. We're going salsa dancing tonight, actually, like on the
Oh,
riverbank
that's my favorite.
outside. I know
That's
it's so fun. And I'm the first person on the dance floor if we're out. And I don't go party. I don't drink. I don't care about that stuff, but I love to just like be part of that. Like the Sufi dancers, like all those people, there's like static dancing, like all that stuff. I love dance and music. Music. It's so
yeah,
healing and cathartic, healing sounds and tones and like binaural beats. And there's so many really brilliant composers that understand all those concepts about like
yeah,
this whole connection with everything about us and our senses, as well as like our hearts and all that stuff, chakras work, all that. It's just gorgeous. I love it all. And you don't have to understand it all to play some classical music or go dancing. You don't have to understand all
absolutely.
that for it to
No, you
work.
don't, you just have to, right, exactly. I mean, I'll notice when there's tension in our house, like, in the
Mm,
morning, and we'll just put on music and just all of a sudden start dancing, and like everyone's, gets involved in some way, and that it changes the whole energy of the house,
yeah. And
and the mood.
Michelle, we're talking about that. Actually, Rose and I are doing a conversation about the raising the vibration in your home. So we're going to talk about all
Oh,
those ways to do
good.
that.
I can't wait to, I won't jump into that but yeah,
No, but it
I can't wait to
is.
watch it.
Oh yeah, it is something else. And I wrote like pages and pages about it, all the benefits and what you could do. Yeah, so be sure to watch that if anybody's listening to this and interested in knowing how to do that and some
That's
ideas about that. I
so
also find
important. And
something that's very harmonizing. Homeopathy, homeopathy as well, right? Because you can work on the
yes,
emotional level as well as just like, on that symptom level, like you identify what's happening by the symptom, but it's not where there's no diagnosis, there's no, like it's literally like what's happening with my body today? How do I rebalance everything? Yeah.
absolutely. And it's interesting because I'm going through this brain work with my kids. And what we do every night is we put on a certain type of music that talks to their right brain.
Yes.
It's just like a type of beat. And then we also do homeopathy. We do some smells. We do like certain ones that talk to, and so we do it every night. And there's different ways, there's different like needs each day that we have to do it. But
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to watch this. I think also balance, with homeopathy, I think also something that's really helpful that we have at our center that I see work magic is acupuncture.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Mhm.
I think all the actual physical healing, because I think it also helps balance out your system, your nervous system to all your organs and to everything. So, I never really, until I met my partner, had really understood the Chinese, the traditional Chinese medicine.
Yes.
And now I'm a huge believer in it.
Yeah, it's another beautiful tool. I love that too. Actually, I've seen people who have had like a lot of pain, and that was like the one thing that was just, I don't know what it was, if it's a release or it is. It's about flow in the meridians, right? In that
I
system.
think it's
And
about
yeah,
flow. I think it's both physical, like it does release flow. It kind of moves energy around where things are
yes.
stagnant and balances out. But I think it's also mental, I think
Mm,
it gives that permission that like, okay, I'm balanced, I can do it. And you kind of let go of some of the pain that you're having,
yeah.
So I think it works on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, yeah. One other thing and there's also things like release, like with sports and, like getting out there and just moving your body and like, breathing. I mean, you do all those things naturally. And nature for me is massive.
Mhm.
Like that's where I find my connection to self, to others, to the planet, to the
Mhm.
universe, to everything that means my existence or our collective existence. Like nature teaches me, like my kids grew up outside, really. Like we would spend 6 hours on the riverbank and we would never know that that time went by. And that is how they were like, that's the kind of education I want to see kids have. Like, and my kids, like, because it was literally, you can look at a leaf and know the secrets of the universe. You can watch how a cat plays out in the grass and you will know the secrets of the universe. Like it is literally everything you would ever want to know. And it is so heart centering. Um,
Yes.
in a way that is like it's pure love, pure peace. I know I'm going off on a tangent about this, but
No, but I agree with you. I used to walk my kids, with, they don't take a bus anymore, but when they were taking a bus for a bunch of years, I would walk them until December. It was freezing out.
yeah,
We're in New York, but I would walk them ground myself without shoes and socks, and I would just kind of
yeah,
walk barefoot in the middle of the winter, and people are like, "What are you doing?" My neighbors are thought I was crazy. I was like, I just spent an hour getting them ready. Like, I need to ground myself and get into my day. And
yeah,
it
and
is,
that's
nature is so important. When I lived in the city, I raised my kids. So I'm so jealous when you said your kids spent 6 hours on the riverbank, because that to me
mm-hmm,
is like heaven.
yeah,
I was raising them in the city, and then all of a sudden one day, my husband looked at me, he's like, let's just get out of here. I'm like, yes. And I didn't realize until like the minute I moved here,
yeah,
we're in the country now. I
mm-hmm,
didn't realize how much I was being stifled, and how much
mm-hmm,
my kids were being stifled just by being in a city where they couldn't be in nature.
yep,
And everything just shifted for all of us, the
mm-hmm,
minute that happened,
mm-hmm.
just by looking at trees.
Well, no, it's true. It is,
Yeah.
it's more than that. It's sensory as well. It's also like the sun, the negative ions in the, in the atmosphere. It's the grounding you get if you're touching the earth. It's like it's because we are meant to cohabit. We're part of nature. We're not even cohabitating with it. Like we're part of nature, and when we're sort of sheaving ourselves off from that. When we don't recognize it, and we're in a city all the time, like if you're in a city, go to the park, go get out of the city anytime you can. We're out in the country now too. And when we used to be
Yeah.
on the riverbank all the time, that's when we lived in the city, but it was smaller cities, so we had lots of green, but now we're out in the country. And it's like, yeah, the sun, the like your body's making vitamin D, you're breathing fresh air, like it's everything in one, it's a one-stop shop for health.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of people struggling with like healing from COVID, and they're not getting over it so quickly, and because they're locked in a quarantined room or whatever,
Yes.
in our center. And we're just go outside, get that vitamin D.
Go
Like, do
outside.
not put sunscreen on. Go out and sit outside and be in nature, and like you will heal.
Yep.
Eventually it'll happen.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally. One other thing I want to mention really quickly, and then we better bust off because we're at the end of our
Yeah.
time and gonna
Yeah.
record
That's
another
okay.
one. Is you were talked about DBT, but I don't know if you've heard about MCT. And this we should have ended on nature because that's my favorite. But metacognitive, and it's a therapy, but I actually rather think of it as a practice. Like all these things, I don't like to consider things therapies, like because they should become natural. They should be something you do because you want to, and it's flowing, and you understand it, not because you're going there to like, yeah, I got a therapy appointment from 2 to 3, and I got this. No,
Well, it's just like it's really like anything. What you Until it becomes a lifestyle, and in a way of being, in a way of thinking,
yeah,
it won't last.
yeah,
So whether it's diet, exercise, or DBT, or therapy, until you embody it,
mm-hmm.
you're going to be going there you're going to be doing it
You
forever, and
will.
finding a new diet, or yeah.
And therapy kind of denotes there's something wrong with you, right? It's like, well, there's something not like right. Like, I mean, there's something I want to address, and I don't want to feel this discomfort forever. I want to move through this process. But
Mhm.
like it does sort of denote that a bit. So I like to say practices. Like I'm practicing yoga. I'm going to, I'm practicing this MCT kind of idea. And so just metacognitive, it's thinking about our thinking. And I think that's another starting point for to make all of the rest of this actually happen, and being like you said, allowing, willing to embark on some kind of changes, right? And so it's basically it's thinking about our thinking, and so what we're focusing on, what we and being able to like, okay, witness thoughts that come and know they don't necessarily have to be true. You don't have to dwell on it. I mean, yeah, maybe you've been in financial strife, and or the weight on the world is of the world you feel is on your shoulders, but we have to live there all the time? Do we have to dwell on that, or can we train our brains to focus where we want the focus to be? And so I think that's part and parcel to this whole opening up for people into these new, not new, they're ancient healing practices, like I was saying,
Yeah.
ancient ways of being
Yeah.
that we're overcomplicating everything and calling everything a therapy and blah blah blah, but really the stuff we're talking about is connecting all of that.
I totally agree. And when I was going through the DBT therapy, like I just kept saying, this is human, like knowledge,
Yeah.
like this is human therapy. Like this isn't
Yes.
teaching me to parent. This is teaching me how to be human,
Right.
or not teaching me, but really reminding me what it's like,
Reminding you.
reminding,
Exactly.
right? Because we know this instinctively. It's just we get away from it because we get so involved in our thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Totally. And then our thoughts can be largely controlled with outside things, and we think they're true. And it's like, actually, that's an opinion, or that's a cultural misnomer, or, it's
yeah,
actually not a healthy way to think, or, all that
right.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And it can also be coming from the person you're talking to, or a lot of these things. And this is something I learned as a teenager. It's like it's not you. Like,
Mm.
when you're dating, it's like someone. I used to think of this like, if someone doesn't call me back, I really had to learn, be like, this isn't what, I didn't do anything to make them not call me back, right? This is all their stuff. Whether
Yes.
but I think it's something that we just learn, that like we have to own who we are, and we have to live authentically, and what feels good in our body and in our brain and our mind. And if we know that we've lived authentically
Mm-hmm.
and to the truth, that's our truth,
Mm-hmm.
then anything else is just them. it's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's outside our body, and it's we
Mm-hmm.
don't control that. And it kind of comes down to the whole fact, like, what can you control? You can control your
Right.
thinking, you can control your actions, right? And so ultimately, I think this is a good way to end this conversation. It's
Totally.
like
You go, girl. You go,
but,
girl. Drop the
but
mic.
like, drop the mic drop. But it is all about what we can control, and it's your mind and body. And there you go. Let's end
And
on that.
let's end on that. We hold the power, right, Michelle? Yeah.
Absolutely,
We
100%.
do. Sweet. Well, that was awesome. We better bust off, but thanks so much for being part of that conversation. There's so much more to explore there, and I hope that what we talked about sparks more and more and more curiosity and diving into all this stuff and just really enriching your experience here on earth and knowing, yeah, you hold the power. So thanks so much, Michelle, for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carla, for having me. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes.